I stared at my laptop screen, blinking in disbelief. An email from my parents sat in my inbox, sent to an address I barely checked anymore, my old high school email. 10 years. It had been 10 years since I'd spoken to any of them. Dear Tessa, it read. We're writing to let you know that in 2 weeks, there will be a family reunion at your brother's newly purchased house. All the closest relatives will be there, and we think it's the right thing for you to come too. At the bottom was my brother Derek's address. I snorted, the right thing to do, classic mom and dad. I closed my laptop and walked to the window of my office, looking out at the city below. The restaurant empire I'd helped build had its headquarters on the 20th floor of this building. Far from where I started. After thinking about it for a day, I decided to reply. I'll be there, was all I wrote back. Then I sat back in my chair and let the memories flood in. I was always the odd one out in my family. Derek was the golden child, handsome, funny, outgoing, and the absolute center of attention. Everyone adored him. Our aunts and uncles practically worshipped the ground he walked on, grandparents spoiled him rotten. Mom and dad? They might as well have had a shrine dedicated to him. Me? I was just Tessa the mouse. Quiet, shy, awkward Tessa who preferred books to people and silence to chaos. Why can't you be more like your brother? Mom would ask when I'd hide in corners during family gatherings. Those family gatherings were absolute torture. Derek would be in the middle of it all, playing his guitar while everyone clapped and cheered. Meanwhile, I'd find the most isolated spot and count the minutes until I could escape. There goes the black sheep, Aunt Linda would whisper, not quite quietly enough. Such a strange girl, Uncle Rob would reply, shaking his head. My cousins were just as bad. When we were kids, they'd actively exclude me from their games. We don't want Tessa, she's boring, my cousin Zach would announce. Yeah, she never talks anyway, his sister Amber would add. So I'd retreat to a corner with a book, pretending I didn't care, while inside I was being torn apart. When Derek graduated high school, the entire extended family pitched in for his college tuition. It was all anyone talked about for months. Derek got into State University, isn't that wonderful? We're all so proud of him. He's going to do great things. 2 years later, when it was my turn to graduate, Mom and Dad sat me down at the kitchen table. Tessa, Dad said, we don't have money for your college. All our savings went to Derek's education, Mom added, you need to find a job and support yourself. I wasn't surprised, but it still hurt. The next day, I got a job as a waitress at Sam's Diner, a local restaurant about 10 minutes from our house. I thought things couldn't get worse, but they did. My cousins started showing up regularly, sitting at tables in my section. Look at loser Tessa, Zach would say loudly, guess this is all she's good for. Amber would laugh, I bet she'll be doing this for the rest of her life. After a particularly humiliating shift where they left me a 5-cent tip with career advice, be someone else written on the receipt, I'd had enough. That night, I told my parents I was quitting and moving to the other side of town. I got a job at a different restaurant, I said, and I'm going to rent an apartment with some coworkers. Mom actually smiled, that's probably for the best, honey. Dad nodded, you're old enough to be on your own anyway. 2 days later, I packed everything I owned into 3 cardboard boxes. Neither of my parents helped or even seemed sad to see me go. Derek was away at college, probably having the time of his life. As I walked out the door of my childhood home, Mom called after me, don't forget to let us know your new address. I never did, and they never asked again. The apartment I moved into was small and cramped, shared with 2 other waitresses, Jamie and Liz. We each paid a third of the rent, which was all we could afford on our meager salaries. The restaurant where I got hired was called Bella's, run by a woman named Isabella Martinez. It was nothing fancy, just a mid-range place serving decent food. But it was as far from my family as I could get while still staying in the same city, and that was all that mattered to me. I threw myself into the work, arriving early, staying late, picking up extra shifts whenever I could. I needed the money, yes, but more than that, I needed something to focus on besides the hole in my heart where a family should have been. 6 months into my job at Bella's, I noticed Isabella watching me more closely. One evening as I was finishing my shift, she called me into her office. "Tessa, I've been impressed with your work ethic," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "You're the most reliable server I have." "Thanks," I mumbled, not used to praise. Isabella leaned forward. "I want to make you head waitress. It comes with a $1.50 raise and more responsibility." My eyes widened. "Really?" "I mean, yes, thank you." She smiled. "There's something else. Have you ever thought about restaurant management?" I shook my head. "The community college has courses in restaurant management." "I think you have potential, Tessa. I'd be willing to work around your class schedule if you're interested." For the first time in years, I felt like someone believed in me. "I'd love that," I said. With my promotion and slightly better pay, I was able to move into my own tiny studio apartment a few months later. It wasn't much, just a single room with a kitchenette and bathroom, but it was mine. No roommates, no family, just me. The holiday season was approaching, and despite my better judgment, I called home on December 15th. "Hi Mom, it's Tessa." "Oh, hello dear," she said, sounding distracted. "How are you?" "I'm good. I was wondering about Christmas plans. I thought maybe I could." "We're spending Christmas at Aunt Karen's this year," she interrupted. "Derek will be home from college, and everyone's excited to see him." "Could I join you there?" I asked, my voice small. There was a pause. "Well, to be honest, Tessa, no one really asked about you. I think it would be awkward if you showed up now." I hung up and cried for an hour, then I dried my tears and made a decision. I was done reaching out. If they didn't want me, I wouldn't waste any more energy wanting them. The next day at work, Isabella noticed my red eyes but didn't pry. Instead, she handed me the closing shift for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. "Double pay," she said. "I figured you might want it." I nodded gratefully. "Thanks, I don't have anywhere else to be." "Their loss," she said simply. I threw myself into work and my studies with renewed determination. The restaurant management courses opened my eyes to a world I hadn't known existed. I discovered I had a head for numbers, a talent for organization, and surprisingly, a knack for leadership. By the time I turned 24, I was the general manager of Bella's. I had my own office, tiny, but still an office, and a salary that let me upgrade to a one-bedroom apartment. Then came the day that changed everything. Isabella called me into her office, looking troubled. "My aunt died," she said, "left me some money, about $200,000. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said. She waved her hand. "We weren't close. But now I have this money, and I don't know what to do with it." I waited. "I've been thinking about expansion," she continued, "opening a second location, maybe a third. What do you think?" I didn't hesitate. "I think it's a great idea. I could help you draft a business plan, it's what I've been studying." That night, I stayed up until 3 a.m. researching and drafting. I poured everything I'd learned into that business plan: market analysis, financial projections, staffing needs, location scouting. When I presented it to Isabella the next day, she was stunned. "This is professional grade work, Tessa." I shrugged. "It's what you deserve." 6 months later, we opened the second Bella's across town. 3 months after that, a third location downtown. Both were successful from day one, thanks to careful planning and the solid reputation of the original restaurant. On my 26th birthday, Isabella invited me to dinner at the nicest restaurant in the city. After dessert, she pulled out an envelope. "Happy birthday, Tessa." Inside was a legal document naming me as a 30% partner in Bella's restaurant group. I stared at her, speechless. "You earned it," she said. "I couldn't have done this without you. And honestly, I'm tired. I want to spend more time with my family. You're young, ambitious, and you have vision." I don't know what to say, I managed. "Say yes, we'll make it a restaurant empire." I laughed. "A restaurant empire, I like the sound of that." Over the next 4 years, we expanded to 12 locations across the state. I became the face of the company, handling everything from menu development to marketing. Isabella joked that she was semi-retired at 52. The shy, awkward girl I once was had vanished. In her place stood a competent, successful businesswoman. I bought a luxury house in the best neighborhood in the city, modern, spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the skyline. My car was a sleek Mercedes. My bank account had more zeros than I'd ever imagined possible. The only thing that hadn't changed was my relationship with my family. Zero contact for nearly a decade. They were as much strangers to me as the people I passed on the street. So when that email arrived in my old account, the one I kept active only because some old business contacts still used it, I was genuinely shocked. A family reunion, at Derek's house, the right thing to do to invite me. As I sat in my home office, staring at the email, I wondered why I was even considering going. Did I want reconciliation, recognition, revenge? Perhaps it was a mixture of all three. Or maybe I just wanted to see for myself what I'd left behind, to confirm that walking away had been the right choice. The day of the reunion arrived with perfect spring weather. I stood in front of my closet, contemplating what to wear. I didn't want to show up in something flashy that screamed successful businesswoman. That would be too obvious, too desperate for approval. Instead, I chose an understated but expensive outfit, dark jeans, a silk blouse, and a cashmere cardigan. My only concession to luxury was my watch, a subtle Cartier that cost more than Derek probably made in 2 months. I checked my reflection in the mirror. At 30, I looked nothing like the shy girl who had left home a decade ago. My hair was styled in a sleek bob, my posture competent, my eyes clear and focused. I wasn't that hurt child anymore. Instead of driving my Mercedes, I called a taxi. Another deliberate choice, I'd arrive like a guest, not someone trying to show off. The ride to Derek's neighborhood took about 30 minutes, during which I rehearsed potential conversations in my head. I was determined to stay calm, no matter what happened. Derek's house was average, a typical suburban 2-story in a middle-class neighborhood. Nothing special. I knew without vanity that my home was at least twice as impressive, but I pushed that thought aside. I wasn't here to compare houses. I rang the doorbell, hearing the muffled sounds of conversation and laughter inside. After a moment, the door swung open, and my mother stood there, wearing an apron and holding a serving spoon. She stared at me blankly for a full 5 seconds before recognition dawned. "Tessa, is that you?" "Hello, Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady. "My goodness, look at you," she seemed genuinely surprised, as if she'd expected me to show up in a waitress uniform, hair in a messy ponytail. Come in, everyone's already here." I stepped into the house, immediately surrounded by the familiar cacophony of a family gathering. The living room and dining room were crowded with relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, and their children. My father was chatting with Uncle Rob by the fireplace. Derek was holding court in the center of the room, gesturing with a beer in his hand while a group of cousins laughed at whatever he was saying. As I entered, conversations paused, heads turned, eyes widened. "Is that little Tessa?" Aunt Linda stage whispered. "She looks different," someone else murmured. I nodded politely to everyone but didn't rush to greet anyone specifically. Let them come to me, I thought. My cousin Amber, now in her 30s like me, leaned toward her husband and whispered something. I caught the words waitress and self-important. I pretended not to hear, but inwardly I smiled. They still thought I was a server, and a failing one at that. "Tessa's here," my mother announced, unnecessarily. "Isn't this wonderful?" The whole family together again. My father came over and gave me an awkward side hug. "Good to see you, kiddo, it's been too long." "Yes, it has," I agreed, not pointing out that the phone works both ways. Derek finally noticed me and sauntered over, still the center of attention even while approaching me. Well, he said, giving me an exaggerated once-over, "if it isn't my little sister." "Finally decided the family's good enough for you again?" "Hello, Derek," I said calmly, "congratulations on the house." He seemed taken aback by my composure but recovered quickly. Thanks, just a starter home, you know. I'm planning to upgrade in a year or two when the business really takes off. We all moved to the dining room, where a long table was set with mismatched plates and silverware. Derek naturally took the seat at the head of the table, with our parents on either side. I was directed to a seat at the very end, next to a second cousin I barely remembered and across from a child who was busily kicking the table leg. The meal began with toasts, primarily directed at Derek. My father stood first, raising his glass. To my son, who has made us so proud. From the star quarterback in high school to the successful businessman he is today, Derek has never disappointed us. Everyone clapped. My mother went next. Derek has always been special, she gushed. His auto parts business is thriving, and now this beautiful home. We couldn't be prouder. More applause. Uncle Rob stood. I remember when Derek was just a little guy, already showing the leadership qualities that would make him successful. He's a credit to this family. The toasts continued, each more effusive than the last. Derek soaked it all in, his chest visibly swelling with each compliment. Eventually, he seemed to remember I was there. He looked down the length of the table at me, a slight smirk on his face. What about you, Tessa? Want to say something? All eyes turned to me. I set down my fork, ready to offer a simple congratulation, but Derek cut me off. Still waiting tables, sis? Or have you been promoted to dishwasher by now? The table erupted in laughter. I heard Aunt Linda snicker. Imagine still being a waitress at her age, she whispered to Uncle Rob, loud enough for everyone to hear. 10 years ago, I would have blushed furiously, possibly even cried. I might have made an excuse and fled the table. But not today. Today, I laughed, a genuine laugh that startled everyone into silence. What's so funny? My mother asked, looking confused. I smiled at her. It's funny that after 10 years of not being in touch, none of you know anything about my life, not a single thing. Yet you all feel comfortable making assumptions. The table went quiet. I reached into my purse and pulled out my business card, embossed, elegant, with the Bella's Restaurant Group logo in the corner. I handed it to the second cousin beside me. Would you pass this to Derek, please? And feel free to look at it on the way. He took it, glanced down, and his eyes widened. He passed it to the next person, who had a similar reaction. The card made its way around the table in silence, each person reading it and then staring at me with new eyes. When it finally reached Derek, he looked down at it, then up at me, his face draining of color. Tessa Hamilton, co-owner and CEO, Bella's Restaurant Group, he read aloud, his voice hollow. What does that mean? My father asked, leaning over to look at the card. I took a sip of water before answering. It means I'm co-owner of a restaurant chain with 12 locations across the state. We're planning to expand nationally next year. The silence was absolute. You're a restaurant owner? My mother finally managed. Co-owner, I corrected. I own 30% of the company. Started as a waitress, became manager, then business partner. We've been profiled in Restaurant Business Monthly twice. Derek was staring at me as if I'd grown a second head. My house is about twice the size of this one, I added casually, then deliberately went back to eating my salad. My parents exchanged glances. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, my mother's face transformed into a beaming smile. Tessa, why didn't you tell us about your success? We're so proud of you. I chewed slowly, swallowed, and dabbed my mouth with a napkin before answering. You could have asked about my life at any point in the last 10 years. But you didn't, not once. The table fell silent after my statement. My mother's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. Well, we're learning about it now, aren't we? And we're thrilled. Isn't that right, everyone? Suddenly, relatives who had been mocking me minutes earlier were falling over themselves to show interest in my life. Tell us about your restaurants, Tessa. How many employees do you have? Are you on one of those cooking shows? Derek sat at the head of the table, sullen and quiet, the forgotten center of attention. My father kept glancing between us, as if trying to reconcile the successful woman before him with the daughter he'd written off years ago. I answered their questions politely but briefly. After about 15 minutes of this new, uncomfortable dynamic, I checked my watch and stood up. I should be going, I have an early meeting tomorrow. But you just got here, my mother protested, we have so much catching up to do. 10 years worth, I agreed, but I don't think we'll manage that in one evening. As I gathered my purse, my parents followed me to the door, with several other relatives trailing behind. Derek remained seated, staring at my business card. It was wonderful to see you, Tessa, my mother said, suddenly warm and affectionate, we've missed you so much. I smiled, not unkindly but without warmth, have you? She blinked, taken aback, of course we have, you're our daughter. Interesting, because when I called you that Christmas and asked if I could join the family celebration, you told me no one wanted me there. She had the grace to look embarrassed, that was a misunderstanding. Was it, I asked, or is it that you suddenly want a relationship now that you know I'm successful? Tessa, that's not fair, my father interjected. No, it wasn't fair, I agreed, none of it was fair, but that's in the past now. I walked out the door, hearing my mother call after me, we want to make things right, Tessa, we want to be a family again. I didn't respond. I got into my waiting taxi and directed the driver to take me home, to my real home, the one I'd built for myself. When I walked through my front door, I kicked off my shoes and laughed. Really laughed, loud and free, until tears came to my eyes. The looks on their faces when my business card made its way around the table. The shock, the disbelief, and then the immediate pivot to claiming me again once they realized I was successful. It was all so predictable, yet seeing it play out was still somehow surprising. The next morning, I woke up to 17 text messages and 5 missed calls. 3 texts from my mother, 4 from my father, 2 from Derek, and the rest from various aunts, uncles, and cousins. I scrolled through them without reading closely, then set my phone aside and went about my day. This pattern continued for nearly a week. My phone constantly lit up with notifications from family members who hadn't bothered to contact me in a decade. I ignored most of them, focusing instead on work. We were in negotiations to open 3 new locations in neighboring states. On the 6th day, during a rare quiet moment at home, I decided to answer one call just to end the barrage. It was my mother. Tessa, she exclaimed when I picked up, finally. Why don't you come over for dinner this Sunday? Just you, me, your father, and Derek, a chance to reconnect. I don't think that's a good idea, I replied. But we're family, she insisted, we love you, Tessa, we always have. If you loved me, I said slowly, why didn't you call me once in 10 years? Why didn't you ask how I was doing or if I needed anything? Why did you tell me no one wanted me at Christmas? There was a pause. How can you be so ungrateful, she snapped, her sweet facade cracking, after everything we did for you. What exactly did you do for me? I interrupted. You didn't pay for my education, you didn't support my career, you didn't even call to check if I was alive. We raised you. Yes, you did, and then you decided I wasn't worth your time anymore. Now you've decided I am again, but it's too late. I hung up before she could respond. I felt oddly calm, as if a weight had been lifted. Derek was next. His texts became increasingly desperate, culminating in a lengthy message asking for a business loan to help expand his auto parts store. He needed $50,000, he said. He'd pay me back, of course, with interest. I waited until he'd sent a follow-up, did you get my message? Text before responding with a single word, no. Then I blocked his number. 2 weeks after the reunion, curiosity got the better of me. I looked up Derek's social media page. He'd written a long, self-pitying post about selfish family members who forget where they came from and how some people let success go to their heads. The comments section was filled with sympathetic responses from relatives, all of them rallying around poor Derek, all of them calling me ungrateful and selfish. I should have been hurt, but instead, I found myself laughing again. They hadn't changed at all. They were still the same small-minded, judgmental people they'd always been. The only difference was that now I could see it clearly, without the desperate need for their approval clouding my vision. I closed the browser and turned my attention to the business proposal on my desk. Isabella and I were considering opening a culinary school next to our flagship restaurant, a way to train future chefs and managers while giving back to the community. As I reviewed the numbers, I felt a deep sense of contentment. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I'd built it myself, piece by piece, without help from the people who should have supported me most. And in doing so, I'd discovered my own strength. The next day, as I was heading into a meeting, my assistant handed me a note. "Your mother called the office 3 times, should I keep taking messages or block the number?" I considered for a moment. "Block it," I said finally, "and any other numbers associated with my family. I'm focused on the future now, not the past." She nodded, no questions asked, and I walked into the boardroom feeling lighter than I had in years. The family reunion had given me something valuable after all, not reconciliation, but resolution. I no longer had to wonder if walking away had been the right choice. I no longer had to question whether my family might have changed or if they truly cared about me. They had shown me exactly who they were, and I had shown myself exactly who I had become, someone strong enough to recognize toxic relationships, brave enough to establish boundaries, and wise enough to know when to close a door permanently.